want to ask you about another mystery you cover in this book, NIMSA, and that's the Roswell incident.
Mm-hmm.
Pop culture has made us all aware of the story of the Roswell UFO crash. The popular theory is that a UFO carrying an extraterrestrial crew crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in early July 1947. The US military then allegedly retrieved bodies and the craft, and some believe we back engineered some of this out of this world technology. However, in your book, you state that Roswell was actually the first attempt at manned spaceflight. Can you tell us what you found in your research that supports this? Was this actually the first attempt at manned spaceflight?
The first American attempt, yes. The first American attempt. I have, for a long time, have rejected the ET hypothesis for Roswell. It's very popular. It has been thrown at us for decades. It's the hypothesis that the powers that be want us to embrace, okay? And when you look at the history, I mentioned it before, when you look at the history of the United States Army, Air Force, and then the U.S. Air Force, the Independent Air Force, when you see that they started America's manned space program, when you look at New Mexico, the bases, and you had White Sands and all the bases in New Mexico, of course, where Roswell was at. You had the bomber group there. You had the right guys all in the same place at the same time with limitless money, okay, for the day. They could get whatever money they want. And they were operating in strictest secrecy. Now, when you have many of the foremost aviation medicine scientists, okay, who got into their line of work and developed their specialty with the goal of putting man in space. You have those guys together with the rocket geniuses, okay, the guys who shared that dream of putting man in space, and that's why they got into rocketry, and that's really why they were building these things, okay? That was their personal motive. You have those guys with the aerospace medicine guys. You have secrecy, you have money, you have the resources and the means. What do you think they're going to do? I say, and I lay it out in the book in detail, I lay out all the right guys and the right resources at the right time and circumstances. Of course, they're going to try putting man in space. Of course, the rocket aerospace engineers are going to design and build the craft. Of course, the aerospace medicine guys are going to take everything they know and create a life support system. And of course, they're going to attempt to go out into space. Now, I also lay out the things that were going on at the time and that were being tested. And one of the big, I think it's a smoking gun, is when you look at the Horton brothers flying wing, which we captured, I think, 2 of those, at least 1, but 2 of those. Okay. And then you look at the YB-49, which was our huge flying wing that we're told first flew in, I think, September or October of 1947, okay, which meant it was being built and developed and such, okay. And you look at the original, very first so-called witness drawing of what the Roswell craft looks like, you see that it much more resembles the midsection of the Horton brothers flying wing, a version of that, than it ever did, something from another world. Okay, now it's the Cold War, I argue, the early years of the Cold War. Okay, there was secrecy was the order of the day. It was better that you put out a story that it was, beings from another world than to say the U.S. Army Air Force tried to put men in space, because God forbid the Soviets learned that we were doing that. There's much more evidence for Roswell having been a result of our first attempt at manned spaceflight than it being anything ET. And I have people yell at me and get mad, and they throw their radio or whatever across the room. They don't want to hear it. I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm a disinformation agent and all this stuff. But you know what? I stand on the historical threads and evidence that I pulled and present. And it's, the ET hypothesis to explain Roswell is it's thinner than thin. It's a house of broken matchsticks.